I've been monitoring my neighbor for 347 days now. Not stalking, monitoring. There's a difference, one I'm careful to maintain both semantically and practically. It started innocently, the way these things often do. A package delivered to my door by mistake. His name, his address, just a digit off from my own. When I brought it over, he thanked me with remarkable warmth, too much warmth, really, and introduced himself as Daniel. He seemed normal enough, mid-30s, well-dressed, articulate. But there was something in his eyes that caught my attention. A flicker of something performative, like he was playing the role of grateful neighbor, rather than actually feeling gratitude. I dismissed it initially. People are awkward sometimes. But then I noticed his routine, rigid, precise, almost algorithmic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he left at exactly 7:43 a.m. and returned at 6:17 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays, he departed at 8:22 a.m., returning at 9:46 p.m. Weekends followed different patterns, but they too were consistent to the minute. Nobody lives like that naturally. Being between jobs gave me the time to notice these things. I started taking notes, just out of curiosity. A small journal entry each day. What time he left, what he was wearing, whether he carried anything. It was a harmless hobby, something to fill the empty hours. On day 32, the pattern broke. He left at 3:17 a.m., carrying a duffel bag that seemed heavy. He returned at 5:44 a.m. without it. I noted this with special interest, marking it with a red asterisk in my journal. By day 65, I had installed a small camera facing his driveway from my guest bedroom window. Nothing illegal, it was on my property, merely capturing what was visible from my own home. The footage allowed me to be more precise with my documentation, to catch things I might miss during brief lapses in my attention. I began watching local news more carefully, scanning for reports of anything unusual, missing persons, unexplained events, crimes without suspects. There was nothing that seemed connected to Daniel, but then again, the truly careful ones never generate obvious connections. On day 103, I created a spreadsheet to better analyze the data. I'd accumulated thousands of data points by then: times, clothing choices, objects carried, weather conditions, variations in gait, the occasional visitor, rare, always male, always leaving before dark. Patterns emerged within patterns. His Tuesday clothing selection followed a 6-week rotation, except when it rained, which triggered an entirely different protocol. The heavy duffel bag reappeared every 27 days, always during early morning hours. I wasn't obsessed. I was investigating. The distinction matters. On day 147, I followed him. I kept a careful distance, using the navigation skills I'd developed during my brief military service years ago. He drove to a storage facility 30 miles away, entered unit number 227 with his duffel, and emerged 20 minutes later without it. I documented this in my journal with 2 red asterisks. I considered breaking into the storage unit, but that would cross a line I wasn't ready to traverse. Instead, I expanded my monitoring. I purchased better equipment, a directional microphone, a more powerful camera with night vision capabilities, software to help me organize the growing dataset. Day 201 brought a significant anomaly. A woman visited, the first female visitor I'd documented. She stayed for precisely 49 minutes. When she left, she was walking differently than when she arrived. Slightly unsteady. She drove away with excessive caution, like someone aware they might not be entirely in control of themselves. I followed her to her apartment 12 miles away and noted her address. 3 days later, I saw her face on a missing persons report. That's when my monitoring intensified. I created maps tracking every location he visited. I researched property records and discovered he'd lived in 7 different states over the past decade, never staying longer than 18 months at any address. I found old neighbors through social media, casual acquaintances who remembered him vaguely but couldn't recall much beyond polite, and kept to himself. By day 243, I was sleeping in 3-hour increments to maintain near constant surveillance. My walls were covered with printouts, maps, timelines, and photographs. I'd lost my appetite for anything except information about Daniel. My phone was filled with hundreds of photos of him, all taken discreetly, all catalogued by date, time, and observed behavior. On day 274, he looked directly at my window while retrieving his mail. He smiled and waved. My stomach dropped as I realized he knew. But how much did he know? Was he aware of the extent of my monitoring, or did he merely suspect general interest? I waved back casually and stepped away from the window, my heart pounding violently against my ribs. That night, I heard someone trying my back door handle at 2:17 a.m. The security footage showed nothing, just a brief electronic distortion, then normal empty darkness. I double-checked every lock and slept with a knife under my pillow. Day 300 marked another shift. Daniel's routine changed entirely. His precision remained, but the schedule was new. He began leaving at odd hours, returning at unpredictable times. He started receiving packages daily, small, nondescript boxes that he carried inside with peculiar gentleness. The duffel bag disappeared from the rotation. Most disturbingly, he began standing in his yard at night, smoking cigarettes and staring directly at my house. He'd never smoked before. I understood then, this was communication. He was letting me know that he was aware, that he too was watching. We had entered a different phase of whatever this was. On day 329, I received a package. My name, my address, but I hadn't ordered anything. Inside was a journal identical to the one I'd been using to document him, but this one was filled with notes about me. My routines, my clothing choices, timestamps of my movements. The handwriting was meticulous, the observations clinically precise. The final entry simply read, "He thinks he's the observer." I burned the journal immediately, then spent hours searching my house for cameras or listening devices. I found nothing, which was somehow worse than finding something. Last week, day 340, I saw him talking to my other neighbors, showing them something on his phone, gesturing toward my house. They looked concerned. When they noticed me watching, they quickly dispersed. Later that evening, a police car drove slowly past my home, but didn't stop. Yesterday, day 346, I noticed a small symbol chalked on my driveway. A simple design, a circle with a dot in the center. The same symbol was drawn on Daniel's driveway as well. When I went to wash it away, I noticed an identical mark on my wrist that I don't remember putting there. It doesn't wash off. Today, I sit writing this account, watching through my window as 3 more people visit Daniel's house. They each arrive separately but at precisely calibrated intervals, 10:17 a.m., 11:33 a.m., 12:49 p.m. Each stays for exactly 44 minutes. Each leaves carrying nothing visible but wearing the same unsettling smile. As the 3rd visitor departs, all 4 of them, Daniel and his 3 visitors, turn simultaneously and look at my window. 4 pairs of eyes, 4 identical expressions. They raise their right hands in perfect unison, revealing identical circular marks on their wrists. Perhaps I was never the observer. Perhaps this elaborate performance, this mimicry of normal human behavior, this algorithmic approximation of life, was always for my benefit. Perhaps I was always the subject of the experiment, not the researcher. I've just noticed that the first entry in my journal, from day 1, is not in my handwriting. The doorbell is ringing now. Through the peephole, I can see Daniel, smiling patiently. Behind him stand his 3 visitors and 2 police officers. One officer is holding a document that looks like a psychiatric evaluation form. The other is holding restraints. I'm not going to answer the door. Instead, I'm uploading this account to multiple platforms. If you're reading this, it means I succeeded in at least that small act of resistance. If you've noticed someone in your neighborhood with too precise routines, someone whose patterns of behavior seem just slightly inhuman, watch them carefully. But be aware, they're almost certainly watching you too. And check your wrist. Check it now. Sheriff Ray Dawson had seen a lot in his 23 years wearing the badge in Millfield County, but the manila folder that private investigator Ellis Harding had just slid across his desk made his coffee turn sour in his stomach. 12 women, Ellis said, her voice flat but her eyes sharp. All shopped alone at Westlake Market within the last 8 months. All reported being followed. Photos taken without consent. Notes left on their cars. Some even had their home addresses recited to them by an anonymous caller. Ray flipped through the documentation. Photographs of shaken women giving statements, copies of handwritten notes with disturbing detailed observations, time-stamped security footage screenshots showing the same hooded figure lingering in various aisles. And you're telling me nobody reported this to us? Ray asked, the edge in his voice directed not at Ellis but at the system that had somehow failed these women. They did, Ellis replied, crossing her arms. First few were dismissed as isolated incidents. By the time a pattern emerged, the women had started contacting each other through a community Facebook group. They hired me 3 weeks ago. Ray closed the folder and met Ellis's gaze. He'd known her for nearly a decade, first as a promising deputy who'd left the department after a case went sideways, then as the most meticulous private investigator in 3 counties. If Ellis was concerned, the situation was worse than it appeared. Tell me what you need from me, he said. Official cooperation. Access to the county surveillance database. And someone I can trust watching my back when I go undercover at Westlake tomorrow night. Ray nodded slowly. You think he'll be there? Ellis's expression remained unchanged, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. Thursday nights. Always between 7 and 10 p.m. That's when 9 of the 12 women were followed. The fluorescent lights of Westlake Market hummed overhead as Ellis pushed her cart down the produce aisle, her movements deliberately casual. She'd spent an hour transforming herself into the stalker's apparent type, women in their 30s, shopping alone, business casual attire suggesting they'd come directly from work, wedding rings absent. The weight of the concealed microphone against her ribs was reassuring, as was the knowledge that Ray was monitoring from the security office and had 3 plainclothes deputies strategically positioned throughout the store. How's our visual? She murmured, pretending to examine an avocado. Ray's voice came through her nearly invisible earpiece. Clear in all sectors. No sign of our subject yet. Ellis continued her practice route through the store, selecting items with the distracted air of someone mentally calculating their weekly meal plan. The market was moderately busy, enough shoppers to provide cover but not so many that surveillance became impossible. By 8:43 p.m., she'd made 3 complete circuits of the store. Nothing. Maybe he's not coming tonight, Ray suggested through the earpiece. Ellis was about to respond when she felt it, that distinct prickle at the base of her skull that had saved her life more than once. Someone was watching her. I've got something, she whispered, reaching for a box of pastas she didn't need. Don't see them yet, but they're here. She continued down the aisle, forcing herself not to skin too obviously. The sensation intensified as she approached the dairy section, a relatively isolated corner of the store with fewer security cameras. Ellis, you've got someone approaching from your 4 o'clock. Ray's voice had taken on that controlled tension she recognized from their days working together. Blue jacket, baseball cap, carrying a basket. She angled herself to reach for yogurt on a bottom shelf, using the movement to glimpse the approaching figure. Male, approximately 5 feet 11 inches, mid-40s, unremarkable features. Nothing that would make him stand out in a crowd or a lineup. The perfect anonymity of the predator. I see him, she confirmed, straightening up and continuing her shopping with deliberate obliviousness. Over the next 17 minutes, the man appeared in every section she visited, always maintaining enough distance to claim coincidence, but his basket never accumulating more than the same 3 items. When Ellis finally headed toward the checkout, the man abandoned his basket on a random shelf and followed. He's making his move, Ray warned. Jenkins is on your 9, Lowry covering the exit. We've got you. Ellis paid for her groceries with unhurried movements. Through carefully timed glances, she tracked her follower as he pretended to browse magazines, his attention never truly leaving her. When she headed for the exit, he immediately abandoned the rack and followed. The parking lot was half empty, strategically lit in some areas while others remained in shadow. Ellis had parked her car in one such shadow, following the pattern of the previous victims. "He's still on you," Ray confirmed in her ear. 30 feet back, quickening his pace. Ellis could hear the footsteps now, no longer attempting to disguise their purpose. She fumbled with her keys, playing the part of the distracted woman, vulnerable in her isolation. The footsteps accelerated. "No," Ellis said firmly, dropping the act and spinning around to face her pursuer just as the man reached into his jacket. Floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the scene with harsh clarity as deputies converged from 3 directions. The man froze, his hands still inside his jacket, his eyes widening with the sudden realization that he'd walked into a trap. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" Jenkins shouted, weapon drawn. For one suspended moment, Ellis thought the man might comply. Then his expression twisted into something feral, and he yanked his hand from his jacket, not holding a weapon as they'd feared, but a small object he hurled to the ground with unexpected force. The immediate area filled with blinding smoke. Chaos erupted. Shouts, running footsteps, the crackle of radios. Ellis dropped low beneath the smoke cloud, drawing her own weapon and trying to track movement through the billowing gray. "He's heading east toward the service entrance." Ray's voice cut through the confusion. "Ellis, stay put until this clears." She ignored the directive, keeping low and moving to intercept based on Ray's coordinates. The smoke was already thinning in the night air when she caught a glimpse of blue disappearing around the corner of the building. The service area behind Westlake was poorly lit and cluttered with pallets and dumpsters. Ellis advanced cautiously, aware that the advantage had shifted. This was now his territory, the shadows and hidden places where predators felt comfortable. "Ellis, wait for backup," Ray urged through the earpiece. She paused behind a stack of empty produce crates, listening. The night had gone unnaturally quiet. A soft scraping sound came from her left. Ellis pivoted, weapon raised, but the narrow beam of her flashlight revealed only more empty pallets. "Found something," came Deputy Lowry's voice through her earpiece. "There's a door propped open on the southwest corner." Ellis was calculating the fastest route to that position when something heavy crashed into her from above. She went down hard, her flashlight spinning away across the asphalt, her earpiece dislodging in the impact. The weight on her back was crushing, a forearm suddenly tight across her throat. "You shouldn't have interfered," a voice hissed in her ear, hot breath against her skin. "They wanted to be seen, to be known, to be understood." Ellis drove her elbow backward with all her strength. There was a satisfying crack as it connected with her attacker's ribs, the pressure on her throat momentarily slackening. She twisted beneath him, bringing her knee up sharply between his legs while simultaneously reaching for the small canister on her belt. The man howled but didn't release her completely. His fingers clawed at her face, one thumb pressing dangerously toward her eye. Ellis discharged the pepper spray directly into his face. The effect was immediate. He recoiled, hands flying to his burning eyes, and Ellis scrambled away, gasping for breath. Her weapon had been knocked aside in the struggle, but she'd been fighting without firearms long before she'd ever carried one. She launched herself at the temporarily blinded man, taking him down with a tackle that drove the remaining air from his lungs. "Ellis!" Ray's voice cut through the night as flashlight beams converged on their position. "We've got you!" The man was quickly subdued, cuffed, and hauled to his feet by Jenkins and Lowry. In the harsh glare of the tactical flashlights, Ellis finally got a clear look at his face. "Michael Reeves," Ray identified him, reading from his driver's license. "Employee of Data Vision Security Systems." Ellis felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "The company that installed Westlake's new surveillance system 3 months ago." Back at the station, Ellis watched through the one-way glass as Ray conducted the interrogation. Michael Reeves sat handcuffed to the table, his initial defiance now replaced with a detached calm that disturbed her more than his violence had. "We've searched your apartment," Ray was saying, spreading photographs across the table. "Care to explain the wall of monitors?" The files on each of these women? The detailed schedules and surveillance footage? Reeves smiled thinly. You've only found what I wanted you to find. 12 victims, Mr. Reeves. 12 women you terrorized. Subjects, Reeves corrected with unsettling precision. And there were never just 12. Ellis felt her stomach drop as she moved closer to the glass. I'm a researcher, Reeves continued, leaning forward with sudden animation. I study fear patterns, vulnerability indicators. How modern surveillance creates the perfect environment for targeted psychological manipulation. You're a stalker, Ray countered flatly. Reeves laughed, the sound entirely devoid of humor. A stalker follows one person obsessively. I was conducting a longitudinal sociological study across multiple demographics. The Westlake subjects were just Group C. There's Group A at the Northridge Mall. Group B at Fountain Square Park. Groups D through F in neighboring counties. Ellis exchanged a horrified glance with Deputy Jenkins, who was standing beside her. Get on the phone, she instructed him. Contact every security company in the region. Find out where else Data Vision installed systems in the past year. Inside the interrogation room, Ray's expression remained impassive, but Ellis could read the tension in his shoulders. Why? Ray asked simply. Reeves tilted his head, regarding the sheriff with something like disappointment. Because we're always being watched now. Cameras everywhere. Data collected constantly. But nobody understands what that really means, how it changes behavior, creates new vulnerabilities. His voice took on a lecturer's cadence. I simply made the invisible visible. I showed them they were being watched, made them feel it. Their reactions were illuminating. And the notes? The phone calls? Was terrorizing these women part of your research? Fear is the most authentic human response, Reeves replied, as if explaining something obvious. Everything else can be faked. Happiness, confidence, love, all can be performed. But genuine fear, that's truth. The door to the observation room opened, and Deputy Lowry entered, his expression grim. Sheriff needs to see this, he said, handing Ellis a tablet. The screen displayed a database of employee records from Data Vision's security. Reeves's file was open, showing his position, field technician, employed for 11 months. But it was the prior employment section that made Ellis's blood run cold. Ray, she called through the intercom. Step out a moment. When Ray joined them in the observation room, Ellis handed him the tablet wordlessly. 8 years as Chief Technical Officer at Mindframe Behavioral Research Institute. Ray read aloud, his expression darkening. Specialized in surveillance-based psychological studies. Contract work for... He stopped, looking up at Ellis with alarm. Is this verified? Just came through from the FBI database, Lowry confirmed. They've had him on a watch list for suspected involvement in unauthorized human behavioral experimentation. Nothing they could ever prove. Through the glass, Reeves sat calmly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth as if he could sense their discovery. That's not all, Lowry continued, swiping to the next screen. We traced his cloud storage from a laptop at his apartment. There are files on over 200 individuals across 6 counties. And each file contains the same strange notation, Phase 1 complete. Ray handed the tablet back to Lowry. Get a team to secure all of Reeves's equipment and data. Full hazmat protocol. We don't know what else he might have planned. He turned back to the window, studying their suspect with new understanding. He wasn't just stalking them, was he? Ellis said quietly. Ray shook his head. No. He was conditioning them. The question is, for what? In the interrogation room, Reeves suddenly looked directly at the one-way glass, his gaze seemingly fixed exactly where Ellis stood. The small smile widened into a grin. He can't see us, Ray assured her, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. Can he? Ellis murmured, the weight of everything they'd discovered settling over her like a shroud. He's been watching us all along. And I think we've only seen what he wanted us to see. Reeves continued staring, his grin unwavering, as if privy to a joke no one else understood. He raised his cuffed hands slightly, tapping his index finger against the metal table in a deliberate pattern. Tap tap. Pause. Tap tap tap. Pause. Tap. Ellis felt her skin crawl as she recognized it. Morse code. A simple message, repeated with precise clarity. Phase 2 begins. Sheriff Miles Holbrook had always considered himself a rational man. 26 years in law enforcement had taught him that most mysteries had logical explanations. Missing hikers usually took wrong turns. Strange noises came from wildlife or wind. And reports of monsters were almost invariably bears, viewed through the distorting lens of fear. So when 3 separate hiking groups reported encountering something wrong with a bear in the northern section of Blackwater Forest over a single weekend, Miles approached the situation with methodical skepticism. "Define wrong," he said to Park Ranger Diane Fletcher as they reviewed the incident reports. Diane, a veteran of the Forest Service with a master's in wildlife biology, hesitated. "None of them can articulate what was wrong. They use different words, strange, off, not right, but the descriptions are frustratingly vague. Probably just a black bear with mange," Miles suggested. "People see a bear that doesn't match the picture in their head, and suddenly it's a cryptid." "That's what I thought too," Diane agreed. "Except all 3 groups were experienced outdoors people. And the McKinneys, the hunting family, they managed to get pictures." Miles studied the images on her tablet. A large black bear, partially obscured by undergrowth. In the early shots, it appeared to be foraging normally. In the later images, it seemed to be looking directly at the camera. Diane swiped to the final image. The bear had risen to its hind legs, one paw reaching forward. Its mouth was open in what might have been a snarl. But what struck Miles was the animal's eyes. There was something in their expression that seemed almost imploring. Mrs. McKinney said that after this, it started moving toward them in a way that felt wrong. "Not charging, not lumbering like bears usually do," she said, and I'm quoting directly, "it moved like something wearing a bear." Miles felt a chill. He'd known June McKinney for decades. She was level-headed, an experienced hunter who'd encountered dozens of bears. If something had spooked June, it warranted investigation. "Any reports of missing persons in that area?" he asked. "None officially. But there's a research station nearby. They reported one of their trail cameras was destroyed last week." Miles nodded. "I'll drive up there tomorrow, have a look around." The Eastern Research Station was little more than a glorified cabin with solar panels, staffed by graduate students and overseen by Dr. Alan Newell, a wildlife biologist specializing in predator behavior. "Sheriff," Newell greeted him. "This is about the bear?" 3 separate sightings in one weekend," Miles confirmed. "I understand you lost a trail camera recently?" Something flickered across Newell's face. Concern? Fear? Before vanishing beneath scientific detachment. "Yes, about 10 days ago. Not uncommon, bears often destroy equipment they find unfamiliar." Newell hesitated. "Though this one was particularly thorough. Mind if I see it?" Newell led him to a small workshop. On a metal table lay the remains of a high-end wildlife camera. It hadn't merely been damaged, it had been systematically destroyed. The casing was cracked open, the internal components not simply broken but seemingly sorted into small, neat piles. "This doesn't look like regular bear damage," Miles observed. "No," Newell agreed quietly. "It doesn't." Miles studied the biologist carefully. "Dr. Newell, is there something you're not telling me?" Newell seemed to wage an internal battle before responding. "Some of my students have reported unusual vocalizations at night. Not consistent with known wildlife." "What kind of vocalizations?" "They described it as someone trying to imitate human speech without understanding language. Like hearing phonetic sounds without meaning." Newell's scientific facade cracked slightly. "I dismissed it as wind in the trees, until I heard it myself 3 nights ago." Miles interviewed the 4 graduate students currently stationed at the research center. Their accounts aligned unnervingly well, all describing the same speech-like vocalizations, always after midnight. too reported finding small, meticulously arranged piles of stones outside their cabin doors in the morning. Like cairns? Miles asked. No, replied a pale, exhausted-looking woman named Jess. More like sorting. Different types of stones separated by color or texture. By late afternoon, Miles drove to the location of the most recent bear sighting. Nothing immediately struck him as unusual until he noticed a series of markings on a pine trunk. At first glance, they resembled typical bear claw marks. But looking closer, Miles realized they were too regular, too precisely spaced, 3 parallel lines, then a space, then 2 more lines, repeated down the trunk. As the light began to fade, he decided to head back to his vehicle. He was about a quarter mile from the trailhead when he heard a branch snap behind him. He turned slowly, hand moving to his sidearm. About 50 yards back stood a large black bear. Even at this distance, Miles could tell it was watching him. Hey there, Miles called out calmly. Just passing through. The bear didn't move. Didn't flee, didn't approach. It just stood there, watching, with an unnatural stillness that made the hair on his neck rise. He continued his slow retreat. The bear finally moved, not toward him, but paralleling his path, always keeping the same distance, always watching. Back at the research station, Miles found Dr. Newell in the laboratory. I saw the bear, Miles told him. It followed me back to the trailhead. Followed? Not charged. Followed. Kept its distance, just watched me. Newell removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Sheriff, I'm a scientist. What I'm about to say has no scientific basis, but... He hesitated. 2 months ago, we began finding animal remains in that section of forest. Not kills for food. These were different. Systematically taken apart and arranged. Like something was learning anatomy. Miles felt his mouth go dry. Then 3 weeks ago, we found a bear carcass. It had been opened. Not eaten, not attacked, opened. Like a dissection. And its face. Newell swallowed hard. Its face had been removed with remarkable precision. Deputy Wilson was scheduled to arrive by noon the next day. Miles decided to use the morning to check a set of motion-activated cameras Newell had placed near the most recent unusual findings. The cameras were located in a particularly dense section of forest. The morning was unnaturally still, no birdsong, no rustling of small animals. Just silence, broken only by Miles's footsteps. He found the first camera where Newell had marked it on the map. The memory card showed typical wildlife, nothing unusual. The second camera was located near a small clearing. As Miles approached, he noticed something in the center, a dark mound that hadn't been visible from the tree line. Cautiously, he moved closer. It was a pile of forest debris, leaves, twigs, pine needles, small stones, arranged in a perfect circle about 6 feet in diameter. In the center lay a bare paw, recently severed, palm up in a disturbingly human-like position. When he reviewed the second camera's footage, his unease transformed into ice-cold dread. The camera had captured several images of the clearing. In the first set, the clearing was empty. In the second, taken around midnight, a dark shape was visible, bear-like in outline, but its proportions were wrong, its posture uncomfortably upright. The final set, timestamped 3:17 a.m., showed the circle of debris being constructed. Miles could make out a large, dark figure moving with deliberate purpose, arranging materials with remarkable dexterity. In the last image, the figure seemed to be looking directly at the camera, a black bear's face, yet somehow wrong in ways Miles couldn't articulate. He was so absorbed that he didn't immediately register the silence, the complete absence of sound that had suddenly enveloped the forest. Then he heard it, a series of sounds from behind him. Not quite speech, but not animal vocalization either. Phonetic approximations of human language, as if something were trying to reproduce conversation without understanding the words. Miles turned slowly, drawing his weapon. The tree line remained still and empty. The sounds came again, from a different direction now, to his right. Then from his left. Then from directly ahead. It was as if whatever was making the sounds was moving with impossible speed, or there were multiple sources surrounding the clearing. "This is Sheriff Miles Holbrook," he called out, his voice steady despite his fear. "Identify yourself." With deliberate slowness, a large black bear emerged from the trees. It walked with an odd gait, not the natural movement of a quadruped, but something awkward and stilted, as if its joints were arranged wrong or it was unused to its own body. It stopped at the edge of the debris circle and rose to its hind legs. The bear's eyes held an intelligence that was utterly foreign, not just awareness, but calculation, curiosity, purpose. The bear's mouth opened, and what emerged was not a growl, but a series of sounds that horrifyingly approximated human speech patterns, rising and falling intonations arranged in structures that mimicked conversational cadence without forming actual words. The bear's remaining front paw rose slowly and pointed directly at Miles. Then it pointed deliberately at its own face. Then back at Miles. With terrible clarity, Miles suddenly understood what he was seeing, what the McKinneys had meant by something wearing a bear. The precise tree markings. The meticulous sorting. The systematic destruction of the trail camera. The careful dissections. Something was learning. Miles's radio crackled. "Sheriff? This is Wilson. Just arrived at the research station." The bear's head snapped toward the sound with unnatural quickness. "Wilson, I need backup at my location immediately," Miles responded, his eyes locked on the creature. "Unknown entity. Potentially dangerous." The bear turned and moved back toward the treeline with that same unsettling gait. At the edge of the clearing, it paused and looked back at Miles one final time. The quasi-speech sounds came again, but this time, amid the meaningless phonetic approximations, Miles clearly heard two syllables. "Me less." Then it was gone, vanishing into the shadows. Miles stood unmoving, a single thought repeating in his mind, not what but who was in those woods. And more disturbingly, what was it learning to do? From the forest beyond came the sound of breaking branches, deliberate, rhythmic snaps. Morse code, Miles realized with horror. 3 short breaks. 3 long. 3 short again. SOS. But was it calling for help, Miles wondered, or simply demonstrating that it understood what humans would respond to? The branch breaking stopped, replaced by that terrible approximation of speech, coming from everywhere and nowhere. And this time, unmistakably, 3 syllables. "Hope okay." A chorus of not-quite voices rose from the surrounding forest, multiple sources producing those same disturbing speech-like sounds in unison. Learning. Practicing. Communicating. Waiting. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.